My entire world shattered in a doctor's office with just one sentence. Leave this hospital now and file for divorce. The man who said it was trembling, staring at my wife's ultrasound. My name is Jared Atkinson. I built my life with the same meticulous care I put into building houses. At 38, I wasn't just a contractor. I was the owner of Cedar Falls' most successful construction company, employing hundreds across 3 states. My hands, tough and calloused, told a story of starting from absolutely nothing, of clawing my way up from a day laborer to a millionaire. 15 years ago, I married Angela Moody. She was the town's golden girl, blonde, ambitious, and from a family whose old money had long since vanished. The Moody name still carried weight, but their bank accounts had been empty for generations. To outsiders, our marriage looked perfect. Angela played the role of the successful businessman's wife flawlessly. Charity galas, immaculate estate, the picture of sophistication. But I wasn't an outsider. I saw the subtle shifts over the years, the growing coldness in her touch, the hours she'd disappear without explanation, the expensive purchases that never seemed to have an occasion. Our son, Trevor, at 14, was the absolute light of my life. He'd inherited my work ethic and Angela's sharp mind, excelling at everything he touched. Coaching his baseball team, spending weekends building things together in the garage. These were the moments that truly defined me. Angela had long since stopped joining us for those. Then came the surprise pregnancy. After 14 years, after so many heartbreaking miscarriages, we'd both resigned ourselves to Trevor being our only child. So, 6 months ago, when Angela announced she was pregnant, my emotions were a whirlwind. I was over the moon, but she seemed distant, almost anxious. Dr. Edmund Harrington, our family physician for over a decade, a kind man in his 60s with gentle eyes, had delivered countless babies in Cedar Falls. He'd been monitoring Angela's pregnancy incredibly closely, given her history and her age. Sitting in his waiting room, I couldn't help but compare this experience to when Trevor was born. Back then, Angela had glowed, buzzing with excitement over every tiny milestone. This time, she just seemed burdened, often lost in thought, a worried expression clouding her face. She blamed it on hormonal anxiety. My best friend and business partner, Chuck Lake, had noticed too. Chuck handled the finances. I handled the operations. Just last week, over our usual Friday beer, he told me, something's not right with her. Man. Sarah saw her at the coffee shop on Main Street, deep in conversation with some guy we didn't recognize. When Sarah waved, Angela practically jumped out of her skin. I'd brushed it off then, but that seed of doubt, it had been planted. Angela's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Late nights, coming home with no shopping bags, taking phone calls in hushed whispers, showing almost no interest in preparing for the baby. That morning, before the appointment, she was unusually quiet, barely touching her breakfast, constantly checking her reflection. When I suggested lunch afterward to celebrate our healthy baby, she just nodded, completely without enthusiasm. And now, as I waited, the gnawing feeling twisted in my gut. I built my empire on instinct, on gut feelings, and every fiber of my being screamed that my perfectly constructed life was about to collapse into dust. Inside the examination room, the gel slid cold against Angela's skin, but it was nothing compared to the ice in her veins. She felt the dread she'd carried for weeks. This modern ultrasound, this window into her womb, was about to expose the truth she'd so desperately tried to bury. The affair. It had started so innocently, 8 months ago. Marcos Jennings, a smooth-talking real estate developer from the state capital. 32, dark hair, a charming smile that snagged her attention at a charity fundraiser. Marcos was everything Jared wasn't. Jared was covered in construction dust, talking building codes. Marcos wore tailored suits, spoke of international investments, of luxury. Angela had felt trapped in Cedar Falls for years. While Jared built his empire in their small town, she'd always yearned for more. City lights, sophisticated circles, wealth that bought respect, not just earned it with calloused hands. Marcos had pursued her relentlessly. Expensive flowers arrived when Jared was at work. Texts filled with poetic promises of a life beyond this small town. He'd rented a luxury suite at the Grand View Hotel, a mere 40 minutes away, where they'd meet twice a week. There, in that hidden world, Angela felt alive again, in ways she'd long forgotten. The pregnancy, it was an accident, a moment of reckless passion, overpowering common sense. By the time she realized, it was too late for the quiet solution she'd considered. The timeline was wrong, dangerously wrong. She'd been with Marcos 3 weeks before her last intimacy with Jared. Dr. Harrington moved the wand, his expression tightening. Angela couldn't see the screen, but she watched his face, her heart hammering. His eyebrows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Is everything all right?" she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to sound normal. The doctor didn't answer right away. He was doing the math in his head, comparing the baby's development to the conception date she'd given months ago. The measurements were significantly off. 3 weeks, at least. This baby was conceived 3 weeks too early. In 40 years of practice, Dr. Harrington had seen this before. The nervous wives, the awkward silences, the trusting husbands in waiting rooms, beaming with excitement. But he'd never seen it with people he'd known for decades. People whose lives he knew, deeply, would be shattered by what this ultrasound revealed. Meanwhile, I sat outside, scrolling through emails. Atkinson Construction was in the middle of its biggest project ever, a luxury hotel complex. I thought about the irony, building the very kind of establishment where, unbeknownst to me, my wife was betraying me. Chuck had texted me about a potential investor, a Marcos Jennings, who was asking about our company. I'd made a mental note to look into it later, always open to new business. Trevor was at school, probably dreaming of being a big brother, eagerly converting the spare room into a nursery, painting cartoon characters with the same meticulous detail he put into everything. I smiled, thinking of his excitement. I had no idea that his world, along with mine, was about to be utterly destroyed. Finally, Dr. Harrington put down the wand. He turned to Angela, his eyes grave. "Mrs. Atkinson, we need to discuss this pregnancy's timeline. Based on the baby's development, conception occurred about 26 weeks ago, not 23, as we originally calculated." Angela's face went bone white. 3 weeks. 3 weeks was the difference that would obliterate 15 years of marriage. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I need to speak with your husband," Dr. Harrington said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is a conversation that affects both of you, and he deserves to know the truth." As he left to get me, Angela closed her eyes. She tried to prepare herself for the end of the world. Somewhere across town, Marcos Jennings was likely closing another real estate deal, completely oblivious to the fact that his secret was about to rip multiple lives apart. And in that waiting room, I, the man who had loved and trusted her for 15 years, was about to discover that my perfect life was built entirely on a foundation of cruel lies. Dr. Harrington's hands were shaking as he walked toward me. In 40 years, he'd delivered countless pieces of bad news, but this felt different. This felt personal. The Atkinsons weren't just patients. I had built the addition to his clinic myself. This wasn't about medical ethics. It was about watching a good man's world crumble. "Mr. Atkinson, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Dr. Harrington's voice was carefully controlled, but I instantly caught the tension. We walked to his office, leaving Angela alone, lost in the examination room. He closed the door, gesturing for me to sit, but remained standing, pacing slightly. He was gathering his thoughts. "Jared, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult, but you need to know the truth." He paused, his gaze meeting mine. "The ultrasound shows the baby's development is inconsistent with the timeline your wife provided. Based on measurements, conception occurred approximately 26 weeks ago, not 23. My brow furrowed, a cold dread beginning to spread. "What does that mean, exactly?" I asked, my voice tight. "It means," he explained, "the child couldn't have been conceived during the time frame when you and Angela were together. According to her medical history and our discussions, you were away on that construction project in Denver during that conception window." The blood drained from my face. It hit me like a physical blow. The Denver project. 3 weeks in January. The biggest contract my company had ever landed. I'd called Angela every night, missing her, looking forward to coming home, celebrating our success. Are you absolutely certain? My voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Harrington nodded gravely. I've triple-checked the measurements, Jared. There's no doubt about the timing. I stood up slowly, my mind reeling. 6 months of Angela's strange behavior, the secret phone calls, the growing distance between us. It all snapped into a horrifying focus. It made perfect, terrible sense. Trevor, my son, he was probably in algebra class right now, so excited about being a big brother to a child that wasn't even his sibling. What do I do now? I asked, more to myself than to the doctor. That's not for me to say, he replied, his voice softening. But Jared, you're a good man. You deserve better. Whatever you decide, protect yourself and Trevor. As we walked back, his words echoed. Leave this hospital now and file for divorce. The words just tumbled out, a raw, heartfelt plea from a man who'd seen too many good people suffer. But I wasn't a man who made rash decisions. Even then, approaching that door, I was already calculating, planning. Angela still lay on the examination table, tears silently streaming down her face. She knew. She'd known all along. Show me, I said to Dr. Harrington. Show me the ultrasound. He hesitated, then turned the monitor. There it was. Undeniable proof. Measurements that screamed Angela's betrayal. The baby was healthy, growing normally. But it wasn't mine. Angela finally looked at me, her eyes desperate, brimming with tears. Jared, I can explain. No, I said, my voice quiet, carrying a coldness I'd never felt, never heard before. You can't. I stared at the ultrasound a moment longer, engraving every detail into my memory. Then, I looked at her, the woman I had loved and trusted for 15 years, the mother of my son, the person who had just destroyed everything I believed my life was built upon. We're going home, I said, my voice eerily calm. We're going to have a conversation, and then you're going to tell me exactly who he is. Angela's face went white. Jared, please. Dr. Harrington, I interrupted, turning to him. Thank you for telling me the truth. Send me copies of everything. The ultrasound, the measurements, the timeline, everything. As we left, Angela tried to speak, but I remained silent. My mind wasn't focused on the betrayal itself anymore. I had processed it, accepted it. My thoughts were already on the future, on Trevor's stability, on my business, on the fact that somewhere in Cedar Falls, a man was walking around, thinking he'd gotten away with destroying the Atkinson family. I had built an empire through careful planning, through methodical execution. I learned early that success wasn't just about hard work, it was about working smart. As we drove home in silence, Angela weeping softly beside me, I was already formulating a plan for justice that the legal system alone could never provide. The man who had spent 15 years building a life was now going to spend however long it took tearing down the lives of those who betrayed him. And unlike my construction projects, this demolition would be personal, permanent, and absolutely devastating. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by awards and photographs that now felt like elaborate lies, documenting 15 years of success and family memories. Angela had retreated to the bedroom, feigning a headache, while Trevor, oblivious to the earthquake that had just hit his world, worked on homework. I opened my laptop. What I did next, I did best, methodical research and planning. My first search was for Marcos Jennings. It didn't take long to unearth information about Cedar Falls' newest predator. Jennings Development Group had a sleek website, showcasing luxury properties across the state. Marcos, featured prominently, was the charismatic CEO who brought dreams to life through visionary real estate. He was handsome in that polished, repulsive way. All white teeth and expensive suits. The kind of man who'd never worked an honest day in his life. His LinkedIn showed him at the very charity fundraiser where he'd likely met Angela. His social media screamed attention and luxury. Digging deeper, I discovered Marcos was married to Samantha Jennings, a prominent attorney in the state capitol. They had 10-year-old twin daughters and lived in a sprawling mansion. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. This man was systematically destroying multiple families. Over the next week, I maintained my routine, a quiet predator gathering intelligence. I told Chuck that Angela was having pregnancy complications, requiring rest. It explained her absence and my own distracted demeanor. Chuck, loyal as ever, took on extra responsibilities without question. I hired Paul Hines, a former police detective specializing in infidelity. Discreet, thorough, exactly what I needed. Within 3 days, Paul had documented Angela and Marcus's weekly meetings at the Grandview Hotel. Photographs, timestamps, a damning picture of calculated deception. Angela had been siphoning money from our joint account for the hotel room. While she told me she was shopping or visiting her sister, she was 40 minutes away, playing house with a man who was lying just as thoroughly to his own family. But I wanted more than just evidence of the affair. I needed to grasp the full extent of this betrayal. I needed a comprehensive, permanent response. Paul's investigation revealed that Marcos was planning to leave his wife, move Angela to the state capitol, and start fresh with their child, funded by Angela's divorce settlement. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a calculated plot to destroy my family and take half of everything I had built, all to fund her new life with another man's child. The depth of the deception was staggering. Trevor remained oblivious, excitedly planning for his new sibling, diligently working on the nursery. Watching his innocent enthusiasm was pure torture, but it also hardened my resolve. Trevor deserved better than a mother who could lie so thoroughly, and a stepfather equally dishonest. By the way, if you're still with me, soaking in this unbelievable story, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. More tales that will make your jaw drop are always on the way. As my investigation progressed, Angela grew increasingly nervous. She sensed my emotional distance but seemed to genuinely believe her charade was holding. She even had the audacity to ask me about paint colors for the nursery, playing the doting wife, all while continuing her twice-weekly meetings with Marcos. Any lingering respect I had for her evaporated. The woman I had loved was a skilled manipulator, capable of looking me in the eye and lying without a flicker. It was a side of Angela I had never seen, and it repulsed me more than the affair itself. I worked tirelessly with my attorney, Jeffrey Dunn, restructuring Atkinson Construction to shield it from any potential divorce settlement. Jeffrey, an old friend who had helped me build my empire, asked no questions when I requested aggressive asset protection. Jared, if you're worried about liability, we can create a more complex corporate structure, he suggested. Do it, I replied. I want everything protected. The house, the business, Trevor's college fund. Everything. Trevor remained a beacon in my increasingly dark world. He kept working on that nursery, painting cartoon characters with the same precision I applied to my own projects. His innocent excitement was both heartbreaking and a powerful motivator. He deserved protection from the chaos that was about to erupt. On Thursday evening, Paul Hines delivered the final, crucial piece of evidence. Through careful surveillance and strategic intelligence, Paul discovered that Marcos planned to leave his wife, Samantha, within the month. Angela would file for divorce immediately, claiming irreconcilable differences, then move to the state capitol with the baby. They've got it all figured out, Paul reported. Marcos already put a deposit on a penthouse apartment. Angela's been researching high-asset divorce attorneys. They think they'll walk away with half of everything you built. I smiled, a cold, hard smile, as I reviewed the surveillance photos of Angela and Marcos at the Grandview Hotel. They are about to learn that some plans don't survive contact with reality. That night, as Angela slept beside me, I finalized my strategy. I would reveal my knowledge in a way that maximized damage to both betrayers, while fully protecting myself and Trevor. Timing was everything. I needed to coordinate multiple moving parts. Neither Angela nor Marcos would escape. Phase 1, intelligence gathering. Phase 2, evidence collection and asset protection. Phase 3, beginning that Monday, would be total war. And Jared Atkinson had never lost a war he chose to fight. Monday morning dawned with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe itself had decided today was the perfect day for destruction. I was awake before dawn, as I had been for 3 weeks, but this morning felt different. Today, the planning ended. Today, execution began. At 7 a.m., I made my first call, the State Environmental Protection Agency. I reported the violations I'd documented at Marcus's construction sites. The evidence was ironclad: photographs, recorded conversations, proof of illegal dumping and safety breaches that endangered both workers and the public. My second call was to the Internal Revenue Service. Marcus had openly bragged about tax strategies that bordered on fraud, and I had meticulously documented every single detail. The IRS takes such reports very seriously, especially when accompanied by substantial evidence. Then, the third call. To Samantha Jennings, Marcus's unsuspecting wife. I debated this, but ultimately, she deserved to know the truth about her husband's double life. Mrs. Jennings, my name is Jared Atkinson. I have information about your husband that you need to know. Could we meet for coffee this morning? Samantha's voice was cautious, but curiosity laced it. I'm not sure what this is about, Mr. Atkinson. Your husband is having an affair with my wife, I stated plainly, and they are planning to leave their families. I have extensive documentation, and I thought you should see it before you make any decisions about your future. Silence stretched for nearly 30 agonizing seconds before she spoke again. What kind of documentation? We met at a coffee shop near her law office. I brought copies of everything: surveillance photos, hotel receipts, the text messages Paul had unearthed, and the ultrasound. The irrefutable proof that Angela was carrying Marcus's child. Samantha Jennings was an impressive woman. Intelligent, composed, clearly devastated, but utterly determined to handle this professionally. As a family law attorney herself, she understood the implications instantly. This is comprehensive, she said, reviewing the documents, her voice steady. You've built an airtight case against both of them. That was the intention, I replied. Your husband has been planning to leave you for my wife. They think they're going to take half of everything I've built to fund their new life together. Samantha's eyes hardened. Not if I file first. Marcus doesn't know I've been documenting his suspicious behavior for months. Combined with your evidence, we spent the next hour coordinating our strategies. Samantha would file for divorce that afternoon, seeking full custody of her daughters and a forensic accounting of all Marcus's business dealings. Her legal connections would ensure a swift, aggressive process. Meanwhile, Angela was at Dr. Harrington's for her rescheduled appointment. She couldn't avoid it any longer. The doctor had insisted. She sat nervously in the waiting room, completely unaware that her world was already imploding around her. At noon, I returned home. Angela was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, a nervous energy about her. She looked up as I entered, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. "How was your morning?" she asked, her voice falsely bright. "Productive," I replied, setting my briefcase on the counter. "We need to talk." Something in my tone made her freeze. She'd been dreading this for weeks, clinging to the hope she could maintain the charade until the baby was born and she could execute her escape. "What about?" she asked, though she already knew. I opened my briefcase, pulling out a manila folder. I spread its contents across the kitchen table: surveillance photos, hotel receipts, the ultrasound images, documented evidence of her affair. Overwhelming. Undeniable. Angela's face went white. She stared at the photographs of herself and Marcus at the Grandview Hotel. "Jared, I can explain." "No," I said quietly. "You can't, because there is no explanation that justifies what you've done to our family." I sat down opposite her, my voice unnervingly calm. "I know about Marcus Jennings. I know about your weekly meetings. I know that the baby you're carrying is his, not mine. And I know about your plan to divorce me and move to the state capital with my money." Angela began to cry, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. The woman across from me was a stranger who had systematically destroyed 15 years of marriage and trust. "I also know," I continued, "that you've been planning this for months. The hotel receipts go back to January, when I was in Denver, closing the biggest deal of my career. While I worked 18-hour days to secure our future, you were planning to destroy it. Jared, please, she sobbed. It's not what you think. It is exactly what I think, I replied. But here's what you don't know. As of this morning, Marcos Jennings is facing federal environmental violation charges, IRS fraud investigations, and a divorce filing from his wife, who now has all the evidence of his affair. His business will be destroyed. His assets frozen. His reputation ruined. Angela's crying stopped. The implications hit her like a punch to the gut. What did you do? I protected my family, I said, and ensured that the people who betrayed us faced appropriate consequences. Marcos won't be taking care of you or your baby. He'll be lucky if he's not in federal prison. As if on cue, Angela's phone buzzed. A text from Marcos. Emergency. Need to talk immediately. Everything's falling apart. I watched her read it. I saw the exact moment she realized her carefully planned escape route had been utterly eliminated. The man she betrayed her family for was about to become a liability, not salvation. Pack your things, I said, standing up. You have until Trevor gets home from school to leave this house. After that, all communication goes through attorneys. Angela looked up, her eyes desperate. What about the baby? What about our family? This isn't our family anymore, I replied, my voice hard. And that isn't my child. You made your choices, Angela. Now you get to live with the consequences. As I walked toward my office to make another round of calls, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The planning was over. The truth was revealed. And justice was being served. Phase 3 had begun, and it was proceeding exactly as designed. Within 24 hours of my revelation, the carefully constructed facade that held Angela and Marcos's affair together crumbled like a house built on sand. The speed and sheer thoroughness of the collapse exceeded even my own expectations. It proved, as I'd always suspected, that dishonest people rarely limit their deception to just one area of their lives. Marcos Jennings received the first devastating blow Tuesday morning. Federal agents swarmed his office with search warrants, all connected to the environmental violations I'd reported. They seized computers, files, financial records dating back 3 years. By noon, the story exploded in the state capital's business journal. Developer faces federal environmental charges. The second blow landed that afternoon. Samantha Jennings filed for divorce, accompanied by a motion for emergency asset freezing, citing marital infidelity and financial irregularities. Her filing included my surveillance evidence, bolstered by her own independent documentation, painting a damning portrait of a man who had systematically deceived both his family and his business partners. Angela, meanwhile, had spent Monday night alone in a hotel, frantically calling Marcos, watching their perfect plan shatter into a million pieces. When she finally reached him Tuesday evening, the man who had promised her a life of luxury and sophistication was barely coherent. Everything's ruined, Marcos stammered, his confident voice now a shaky whisper. The feds seized everything. Samantha's frozen all our accounts. My investors are bailing. I don't know how this happened so fast. Marcos, Angela replied, her voice bitter. He knew everything. He's been planning this for weeks. What do you mean, he knew everything? As Angela recounted the ultrasound revelation and my methodical investigation, Marcos finally understood the depth of the trap. The simple contractor he'd dismissed as an easy mark had orchestrated their destruction with a precision that would have impressed a military strategist. We need to figure this out, Marcos said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe we can. There's no we anymore, Angela interrupted, her own desperation now laced with contempt. You're about to lose everything, and I'm pregnant with your child. How exactly are you going to take care of us now? The conversation ended with Marcos hanging up. Angela was left alone in that hotel room, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. The man she betrayed her family for had revealed himself to be everything I was, but in reverse. Where I was reliable, Marcos was weak. Where I was principled, Marcos was selfish. Where I fought for my family, Marcos abandoned his responsibilities at the first hint of trouble. Wednesday brought more devastating news for both of them. The IRS announced a full audit of Jennings Development Group, with potential criminal charges looming. 3 major investors immediately pulled out of Marcus's projects, citing reputational concerns. His business lawyer grimly informed him that the company would likely be forced into bankruptcy within 60 days. For Angela, the cold reality of her situation became brutally clear. Her sister, Muriel, refused to let her stay, disgusted by Angela's betrayal of me and Trevor. Her parents, the once proud Moody family, were mortified by the scandal, offering only cold disapproval, no support. Chuck, my loyal friend, solidified his allegiance by ensuring word of Angela's affair spread through Cedar Falls' tight-knit business community with surgical precision. By Wednesday evening, everyone who mattered knew exactly what had happened and precisely where the blame lay. Public opinion was overwhelmingly supportive of me and contemptuous of Angela's betrayal. Trevor, my strong son, handled the news with the same maturity he applied to everything else. I saw the pain in his eyes, though. "Is Mom ever coming home?" he asked me Wednesday night, as we worked on a new project in the garage, building a bookshelf for his room, replacing the nursery decorations he had removed himself. "No," I replied, honestly, "but we're going to be fine. We've always been a good team, and that's not going to change." "I'm sorry about the baby," Trevor said quietly. I was really excited about being a big brother. I put down my tools and looked at him. "My son, the one truly genuine, valuable part of my marriage. You're going to be a great big brother someday, when the time is right," I told him. "This isn't about you, Trevor. You did nothing wrong." Thursday brought the final domino in my carefully orchestrated campaign. Paul Hines delivered evidence that Marcus had been embezzling from his own company to fund his lavish affair with Angela. The expensive hotel suite, the gifts, even Angela's shopping sprees, all paid for with money stolen from investors and business partners. The embezzlement evidence was the final nail in Marcus's professional coffin. Within hours of its delivery to federal investigators, warrants were issued for his arrest. He was picked up Thursday evening at his office, led away in handcuffs as local news cameras captured every humiliating moment. Angela watched the arrest on the local news from her hotel room, her hand resting on her growing belly. She finally grasped the full scope of what her choices had wrought. The man she betrayed her family for wasn't just unfaithful and weak. He was a criminal who had used her as an unwitting accomplice in his schemes. Friday evening, exactly 1 week after I had confronted Angela with the evidence, I sat in my office, reviewing the results of my campaign. Marcus Jennings was in federal custody, facing charges that would likely result in a decade in prison. His business was bankrupt, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Angela was alone, pregnant, and facing a divorce settlement that would leave her with minimal assets, thanks to the prenuptial agreement she'd conveniently forgotten and the adultery clause that voided most of her financial protections. Her family had disowned her. Her friends had abandoned her. And the man she betrayed her family for was headed to prison. As I closed the files on my desk, a deep satisfaction settled over me. A job completed successfully. The planning meticulous, the execution flawless, the results comprehensive. The people who had betrayed me were facing consequences proportionate to their actions. And Trevor and I were free to rebuild our lives on a foundation of truth, not lies. Phase 3 was complete. It was time to begin Phase 4, building something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. 3 months melted away since that seismic ultrasound revelation. Cedar Falls had settled into a stark new normal, a landscape shaped by consequences and the quiet march of justice. Winter arrived early, a cleansing blanket of snow covering the town, seemingly washing away the scandal that had dominated every conversation through the fall. Marcus Jennings was now serving a 7-year federal sentence for embezzlement and environmental crimes. The prosecution, armed with my meticulous evidence, had been swift and merciless. No room for plea bargains. The man who once strutted in expensive suits now wore prison orange, aged 10 years and 3 months. His twin daughters lived with their mother, Samantha, who had successfully claimed most of his remaining assets and moved to another state, escaping the wreckage of his legacy. Angela had given birth to a daughter in December, a beautiful baby girl she named Cora. The birth was difficult, physically and emotionally. She faced motherhood alone, in a small apartment across town, supported only by welfare and the minimal alimony granted due to her adultery. The once proud mayor's daughter now worked part-time at a grocery store, struggling to make ends meet, caring for an infant whose father would be in prison until she was school-aged. The irony was palpable to everyone in Cedar Falls. Angela, who had craved a life of luxury, was now trapped in the very poverty she'd always disdained. Her family slowly started speaking to her again, but the relationships remained strained, conditional. The Moody name, once synonymous with prestige, was now stained with scandal and poor judgment. I, meanwhile, had thrived in ways that even surprised me. The divorce finalized in January. Angela received far less than she expected, thanks to our forgotten prenuptial agreement and the adultery clause that voided most of her financial protections. Atkinson Construction landed 2 major new contracts in the aftermath of the scandal. Clients appreciated my integrity, the dignified way I'd navigated such a personal crisis. Trevor had adjusted to our new life with remarkable resilience. Initially, he'd struggled with anger toward his mother, but I worked carefully to help him process the betrayal without letting it poison his view of all relationships. We grew even closer, spending evenings on projects, weekends exploring hiking trails around Cedar Falls. "Dad," Trevor asked one Saturday morning, as we rebuilt the deck behind our house, "do you think you'll ever get married again?" I paused, hammer in hand. I was 40 now, older, wiser, but not bitter. The betrayal had taught me the value of careful judgment, but it hadn't destroyed my capacity for trust. It had just made me more selective about who earned it. "Maybe someday," I replied honestly, "but not until you and I have finished building our new life together. We're a pretty good team as we are." Chuck Lake had become an even closer friend. His unwavering loyalty during my darkest period cemented a bond that went far beyond business. His wife, Sarah, took on a protective role toward Trevor, ensuring he felt supported by our broader community, even as his nuclear family had shattered. The reconstruction of my personal life mirrored my approach to construction projects. Methodical, patient, built to last. I joined the school board, advocating for programs that supported children from broken homes. I started a scholarship fund in Trevor's name, helping local students pursue trade school or college. Dr. Harrington retired in December, selling his practice but remaining in Cedar Falls. He occasionally joined me for coffee. Our conversations often drifted to the ethical challenges of truth-telling and the unexpected ways honesty could lead to justice. "You did the right thing, Jared," the old doctor told me once. "It took courage to tell you the truth, but it would have been worse for everyone if I'd stayed silent." "Including Angela," I replied. Living a lie was destroying her, even if she couldn't see it. The truth gave her a chance to face reality and maybe become a better person. By spring, Angela indeed began showing signs of personal growth, though at a tremendous cost. She worked hard, devotedly cared for Cora, and started counseling to understand her destructive choices. We occasionally saw each other in town. Cedar Falls was too small to avoid it, but our interactions were brief, polite. The anger had faded, replaced by something closer to pity on my part and regret on hers. We had both moved beyond the hatred and hurt to a place where we could coexist peacefully, living entirely separate lives. Trevor had asked to meet his half-sister. After careful consideration, I arranged supervised visits. He was curious about Cora, but clear that Angela's choices had permanently affected their relationship. He remained polite, but distant during visits, protective of his loyalty to me, while maintaining basic human decency toward his mother. As spring bled into summer, I reflected on the year that had changed everything. The betrayal had felt like the end of my world, but it had actually been the end of a lie, one that had slowly poisoned my life for years. The truth had been devastating, yes, but ultimately liberating. It allowed me to build something authentic, something lasting. Standing on my rebuilt deck one evening, watching Trevor practice baseball in the backyard, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. Contentment with my life as it actually was, rather than as I'd imagined it to be. The foundation was solid now, built on truth, integrity, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son who had survived the worst and emerged stronger. 2 years after that ultrasound, Cedar Falls had fully absorbed the brutal lessons of the Angela Atkinson scandal. The town moved forward, armed with the collective wisdom that only comes from witnessing justice, served comprehensively and fairly. The story wasn't just news anymore. It had become a local legend, a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of betrayal and the profound rewards of integrity. Marcos Jennings was still in federal prison, with 5 years left on his sentence. Reports from his ex-wife, Samantha, suggested he'd become a model prisoner, finally confronting the reality of his actions. His twin daughters were thriving with their mother, far away, building new lives free from their father's legacy of dishonesty. Angela continued her slow, arduous journey toward redemption. It remained a difficult path, every step marked by the consequences of her choices. She'd been promoted to assistant manager at the grocery store, a modest achievement, but one that represented genuine progress in rebuilding her life. Cora was now a healthy, happy 2-year-old, a bright spark of joy in Angela's otherwise challenging existence. The relationship between Angela and Trevor had evolved into something civil, but distinctly distant. Trevor, now 16 and remarkably mature, visited his mother occasionally, but he made it unequivocally clear that his primary loyalty remained with me. He had grown into a young man embodying my best qualities: integrity, work ethic, and loyalty, all while avoiding the bitterness that might have consumed someone who'd experienced such family trauma so young. She made her choices, Trevor said to me one evening, as we discussed attending Angela's community college graduation. I can respect that she's trying to do better without forgetting what she put us through. We attended, sat in the back, left immediately afterward. Angela looked across the auditorium and nodded, a silent acknowledgement, understanding that our presence represented closure, not reconciliation. She was grateful for our witness to her small achievement, even knowing the damage to our relationship could never be fully repaired. I had found love again, though I approached it with the careful deliberation that now defined all my major decisions. Pearl Downing was a widow who'd moved to Cedar Falls to be closer to her adult children. She was kind, intelligent, and she shared my core values of honesty and hard work. Our relationship blossomed slowly, over 18 months. We both understood the importance of building something genuine, not rushing into commitment. Trevor approved of Pearl, appreciating her respect for his bond with me, and her understanding that she wasn't trying to replace his mother, but to add something positive to our lives. The three of us formed a comfortable family unit, honoring the past while building toward a hopeful future. Atkinson Construction had grown dramatically, expanding into 3 states, employing over 400 people. The company's reputation for integrity had become its greatest asset. Clients actively sought us out because of my character. The scandal that could have destroyed me had, instead, become proof of my principles and my judgment. Chuck Lake had become a full partner in the business, our friendship deepened by the trials we'd weathered. His wife, Sarah, had formed a close bond with Pearl, creating a social circle that supported us all, respecting our individual needs and boundaries. Dr. Harrington, though retired, remained a respected figure in Cedar Falls, often cited as an example of professional integrity, a man who chose truth over comfort when faced with a difficult situation. His courage in revealing Angela's deception had prevented years of additional lies, allowing everyone involved to face reality and make better choices. Paul Hines, my private investigator, had become something of a local celebrity. Other betrayed spouses sought his services, drawn by his thorough and professional work on the Atkinson case. He had built a reputation for discretion and competence, becoming the go-to investigator for sensitive family matters across the region. On a warm Saturday evening in June, exactly 3 years after that life-altering ultrasound, I stood on my deck. The same deck I'd rebuilt during the darkest period of my life. I was surrounded by the people who had proven their loyalty and worth. Chuck and Sarah were there with their children. Pearl was helping Trevor prepare for his senior year of high school. Jeffrey Dunn, my attorney, had stopped by with his family for the barbecue that had become an annual celebration of survival and renewal. As I watched this gathering of genuine relationships, built on truth and mutual respect, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had, ultimately, saved me from a life built on lies. The pain, which had once seemed unbearable, had led to a growth in wisdom I wouldn't have gained any other way. Any regrets? Pearl asked, joining me at the deck railing as the sun dipped below Cedar Falls. I considered the question seriously, as I did all questions about the past 3 years. About trusting too much initially? No. About how I handled the truth when I learned it? No. About the consequences that followed? No. I looked across the yard where Trevor was patiently showing Chuck's youngest son how to properly swing a baseball bat. The same patient instruction I'd received from my own father decades ago. The cycle of positive influence continued, unbroken by the betrayal that had threatened to poison everything good in my life. The only regret I have, I continued, is that it took a crisis to show me the difference between the life I thought I wanted and the life I actually needed. But even that wasn't really a mistake. It was an education. As the evening wound down and our friends departed, I felt a deep satisfaction, the kind that comes from surviving the worst and building something far better from the wreckage. Angela and Marcos had paid the full price for their betrayal, not through my revenge, but through the natural, inevitable consequences of their choices. Justice followed when truth replaced lies. The foundation was solid now, built on bedrock, not sand. Whatever the future held, I knew I was ready for it. Surrounded by people whose love was genuine, whose loyalty had been tested and proven. Justice had been served, not through hatred or bitterness, but through the simple act of refusing to live a lie and insisting that actions have consequences. In Cedar Falls, my story had become more than just a local legend. It was proof that integrity, patience, and careful judgment could triumph over deception, betrayal, and selfishness. The man who'd lost everything had gained something immeasurably more valuable, a life built on truth, surrounded by people worthy of trust, anchored by the unshakable knowledge that he'd faced the worst and emerged victorious. The ultrasound that had revealed the lie had, ultimately, delivered the truth that set everyone free. And in the end, that truth had been worth every moment of pain it had caused to uncover. This story changed my life forever. It was hard, but it taught me so much. I'm really curious. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I truly want to hear your thoughts.